Hey everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Advocacy. We are honored to have Latifah Williams with us, Esquire. And I'm flying solo tonight. Everybody has a lot going on, but I think me and Latifah can hold down the fort. So, with that being said, Latifah, I'm going to introduce you, let you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump right into the subject.
Okay. Well, my name is Latifah S. Williams. I practice broadly civil rights law, but more specifically special education law and labor and employment law. Um, I've been practicing for over 20 years, a mixture of direct practice and legislative and policy work. Um, and I'm just really honored to be here with Paula. Um, I met her at a disability event, World of Disabilities Expo, and I, I saw her, knew she was out there doing the work that needs to be done, and that's it. Here I am.
Okay. Okay. So I want to jump right into the subject because I will say I know we spoke briefly, but of course when I'm on the podcast as well as any of my team members, we're learning as well. So when you talk about your special education attorney, I know most of us kind of associate that with suing the school system because our kids didn't get the necessary services that they were due. So, can you tell us exactly what you do as far as the special education attorney? Like what all areas that you focus on?
Sure, sure. So some of it, and I know you've heard of advocates. So some of it overlaps with what an advocate does. The other
Mhm.
part, uh, uh, an attorney only can do. So in the beginning, I would meet with a client. Um, we would discuss the situation, and um, sometimes I would accompany a client to an IEP meeting. Um, Other times it's a child find meeting. Which means we haven't even gotten to the steps of going to our IAP. I mean, the person hasn't, the child hasn't been found eligible for special education services yet. Um, so sometimes we go with them to a child find meeting. Um,
Mm.
so that's basically where we start the process. And um, th- other times it goes deeper, as far as sometimes, um, well, I'll say sometimes the parents don't get what they want in the meeting, um, whether they have an attorney or not. And that's when there are further steps. Like, for example, you can file a state complaint.
Mhm.
Um, and so there are situations where a student has an IEP, but the school is not implementing the IEP.
Mhm.
So since the school is not implementing the IEP, um, since the school is not implementing the IEP, the student is not getting the services. So you would file a state complaint. And
Mhm.
oftentimes, um, with a state complaint, the end result is that you'll get some type of compensatory education.
Mhm.
Um, uh, Now, that's skipping the step, sort of, as far
Mhm.
as once you get there, you need to determine if you're going to get the compensatory. They first they determine, is was there a substantive violation of the
Mhm.
rules, and if there is, then they determine, was it to the extent that this person should get compensatory education, and if
Okay.
so, how much, and all of that. So, but the good thing is the state complaint process is a 60-day process. So it's not that long. Now, if you want to go a step further, there's a due process hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with the due process hearing, the concern with the due process hearing is is that you're trying to get normally normally you're on two different wavelengths. I'll say it like that. So
Mm-hmm.
you may want your child to have certain special services, and the school is all the way on the other end of the spectrum, and and to the extent that you may be trying to get your child into a non-public school, which are schools specifically for students with disabilities. um
Mm-hmm.
so if you cannot, you're basically saying the school system cannot meet your child's needs,
Mm-hmm.
and um so you, you want the school system to pay for your child to attend a non-public school. And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times school systems fight that because of the money, even though legally money is not supposed to be an aspect that's taken into consideration at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be all about the student's education. And if the student is not getting the education that they're supposed to get, money is not supposed to be a factor. But we all know realistically it is. And
Mm-hmm.
school systems, I mean, sometimes they'll just tell you, I mean, they won't say it on the record, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Off the record, they'll tell you, or sometimes they'll tell the parent, but we're sitting there trying to prove that they said this to the parent, because nobody, you're usually not going to say it on a recording or anything.
Well, I like the fact that you said starting off. There are some people that don't wear their disability. My daughter is one of the ones that do wear her disability. So determining if she is eligible for special education is not hard for her. But I like the way you started it off, because there are some people who don't wear their disability. So they have to go through that preliminary process of determining if their child is in fact disabled. Um, some have said they've had to go to doctors, or the school has to, they have to be determined disabled by the school as well as the doctors. Tell
Right.
us, let's go back to that process. Can you tell us, for those parents whose special needs individuals do not wear their disability, how do they start that process? Let's start there.
Okay. So for students with invisible disabilities,
Mhm.
I'll say, um, a lot of times, it's a parent, or sometimes it's even a teacher who may recognize the signs or the symptoms.
Mhm.
Um, Other times it's a therapist or a doctor, but um, usually that person may have to go to their pediatrician or go to a therapist and get basically what's equivalent to a doctor's note, but
Mhm.
more so a report or an assessment from a
Mhm.
doctor, that which would really help. But one of the things is, if the school system suspects you have a disability, then they're supposed to have a child find meeting.
Mhm.
So they don't have to know for sure. If they suspect it, and
Mhm.
there are so many different types of disabilities, and if the school suspects that, they're supposed to have a child find meeting where they do assessments to then determine whether or not you have a disability, and whether or not you need an IEP or a 504 plan,
Mhm.
or, or something along those lines.
Okay. So once your child is deemed eligible, and I guess that's what we should say, deemed eligible to receive special education, step two, you want to make sure that the school, once you create that IEP, I'm assuming you have that team meeting. I'm just trying to go through the various steps.
Right.
Step two, I'm assuming they put an IEP, you have a team, they put an IEP together. Can you take us through step two?
Okay. Yes. So step two is the IEP meeting. After the assessments, if the assessments show that the student needs an IEP, um, the school will draft an IEP.
Mhm,
Um, they will send it in advance to the parent.
mhm,
Um, if the parent doesn't receive it, the parent needs to request it. Because the parent shouldn't be seeing it for the first time at the meeting.
mhm,
So the parent um, gets the IEP,
mhm,
and one of the things the parent can do is the parent can bring other people into the IEP meeting with him or her. And so they could bring an advocate, they could bring an
mhm,
attorney, they could bring a family friend who they designate to take notes so that
mhm,
they can sit there and pay attention without having the burden of taking notes. So
mhm,
there are a lot of there are also other therapists, um, like a BCBA or occupational therapist,
mhm,
um, just a speech pathologist. Some of these are other experts that come to the meeting a lot of
mhm,
times at the parent's behest, especially if the person has an invisible disability and you need a little more evidence or, um, for the school to, to take it seriously
mhm,
or to get the proper supports in place. Um, Now the school also has those type of experts on staff, um, but oftentimes they don't necessarily agree with one another. A lot of times, I would say, and I would say most of the time,
okay.
or more often than not, they do. But for the cases when it's contentious and the school has their expert, and the parent might have their expert that refutes what the school is saying,
Mhm,
then it's very important for that person to be there and for that person to have a written report, preferably a written report that they've given the IEP team in advance so that
mhm,
they can look over it, ponder it, and go from there.
mhm,
Um, but so the IEP meeting is the second step. But during that second step, usually at the end of the IEP meeting, that's when a decision is made. So um, a decision is made there, and then from there, that's when the parents decide what are the next steps. Um, you, the parents may decide, hey, we got everything we wanted, or we didn't get everything we want, but we got a good amount, and
mhm,
we want to see how this goes before doing something else or taking another step. And versus if the parent doesn't get anything they want, like in a situation where I was talking about where the parent doesn't have the ability um, to have any of these special services for their child, um, then that's when they may enter a due process hearing.
mhm. Okay.
Oh, and when I say enter, let me just say, when I say enter a due process hearing, I mean, that's filing for due process. Um, and for that step, you go before an administrative law judge, um,
Mm-hmm.
with the Maryland State Department of Education, um, as well as Office of Administrative Hearings. I'm sorry, the Office of Administrative Hearings. So you go before an administrative law judge, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the person that makes that decision. Now, ultimately, you don't get um, due process is not very friendly to the parents. So we'll say that. So a lot of times we do try to settle before getting to the due process stage, um, because the parents they're just it's set up basically for the school system to prevail.
Okay. Now, one thing that I wanted to stress during this time, and I think most parents, including myself at the time, you don't realize that you are a vital part of that team. So I love the fact that you're saying, that if you're not getting what you want, of course, we're not educators, but at the same time, we know our special needs individuals. So coming to the table, I always try to stress to parents that you are a vital part of the team. And at no time should you or your input be disregarded or be dismissed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think that is extremely important at this stage. Um, I also know that even if you're happy with your IEP, now comes the hard work is making sure that IEP um is being your child is on that IEP and everything on that IEP is being done with your child. So I think
Yes.
I don't know what stage you would call that. Is that stage three or just part of that process? Because it's a IEP can look real nice on paper,
Mhm. Right.
but when you're coming and your child is not, they're not utilizing that IEP properly, or they're not, I'm trying to use the wording and you can help me with that, Latifa. If that thing is not unfolding where your child is being, that IEP is being utilized properly, that's where the problem a lot of times comes in.
Yeah.
And that's where we begin that data process. So can you jump in there?
Right. No, I agree with you 100%. One of the main problems is the IEP not being implemented.
At the
So,
implementing, I like that, implemented.
so
Yeah.
you have this great IEP that a bunch of the IEP team got together,
Yeah.
the parent, which is usually a parent, a school administrator, a special ed
Mhm.
teacher, a general ed teacher, um, and usually um, either speech therapist or occupational therapist or
Mhm.
another specialist, and those people are, and a guidance counselor, and those people are usually the IEP team,
Mhm.
and and they come up with a great IEP, and that really seems like it will work for your child. The only problem is school starts and they're not doing that. What's written down, the school is not adhering to it.
Mhm.
And at that point, that's when you need to call an IEP meeting. Um,
Mhm.
because parents can call an IEP meeting at any time.
Mhm.
So that's another thing that sometimes people don't know. So if you believe the school is not implementing your child's IEP, then call an IEP meeting and try to get down to the bottom of it. And one of the things that I would say, like, it's very important for parents to get their documentation together when they're coming to these meetings.
Mhm.
So if a parent calls an IEP meeting, um, I would suggest they would bring a current copy of the IEP, the most recent evaluations, progress reports, report cards, a behavior intervention plan, if that's applicable to the child, discipline records
Mhm.
or incident reports, all communication logs with the schools, any emails, notes, messages you sent, prior behavior data such as frequency, patterns, triggers, and then any type of medical data or mental health data if it's relevant, and then outside reports. Because
That is
sometimes
very
parents have done,
important. That is very important. I'm glad you said that. That is very
yes,
important. Those outside evaluations, because you definitely need to have that, because you need a neutral party that is not attached to the school and that is not attached to you. That is a very important fact. I'm glad you said that,
absolutely,
Latif. Hmm.
absolutely. Even
Hmm.
though a lot of times the school says their person is neutral, and a lot of time it is still hard to get around that. But
Hmm.
the parent getting an IEE, independent educational evaluation,
Hmm.
it is is big. I mean, that's one thing. Um, that's one thing that it's hard to refute when you have a parent that went out on their own,
Hmm.
and, and went through the trouble, and oftentimes even had to pay to get
Hmm.
this, 'cause most of the time insurance isn't covering it,
Hmm.
um to, to, to get this done, then you generally know that, um that it's an independent evaluation, and this is the most fair process
Hmm.
that you can do, coming from the outside in.
Mm. I do like the fact that you're mentioning these processes. And the reason why I wanted to start off like this is because a lot of people do not know the steps when it comes to the IEP process. It is a process. And again, as a parent, I will say I've had to go through it. It's a lot of work. I will say that it's a lot of work, but you definitely have to stay on top of the IEP. You definitely have to stay in contact with the school. You definitely have to do those visits. You definitely have to make sure that data is truly representing what you're seeing with your child.
Absolutely.
Because if you're not, again, that's where you have to put the school. It's almost like, in Latifa, I don't know if you would agree with me, but it's almost like the burden of proof is on the school, but it's also on the parent. Because you can come to the table and you can say, well, I don't see this at that point, and I've done it before, and the school has had to prove to me that the data that has been presented is in fact factual data. You can put the test, you can put the school to the test. So make sure if they say your child is doing this, that, and the other, that you see it. Because
Right,
if not, what's happening is just like with our neurotypical kids, if they didn't get 1 plus 1 right, as they're advancing, that 1 plus 1 is going to cause a problem down the road. So if they don't get the process down as they advance, it's going to get worse. So you
right,
kind of want to get it at a place where um it's on the ground floor. Wherever there's a problem, that we, as the parent, as the school, are taking this seriously and understanding that this is a problem and we're not going to stop until we resolve this problem before we advance them.
right, right. No, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, there's really nothing much to say as far as that point. Um,
Now, I do want us to, I know our subject is, like the suspensions and the manifestations and everything. So I kind of wanted to start at the base level, and then I'll let you kind of guide us into that process.
okay, okay. So, generally, students, w- when they make a mistake, the school disciplines the student. Usually, will say a suspension. Um, well, there are different rules in place for students with IEPs and 504 plans.
Mhm.
So there's this meeting called a manifestation determination review. And if you've been suspended, if you have been suspended for 10 or more days, it's a requirement for the school to have what a manifestation determination review. And what that is, that's a
Is that a
meeting.
total of 10 days? I'm sorry. Is that a total of 10 days when it totals up to 10 days?
Yeah, no, great question.
Okay.
Yes, it's a total
Okay.
of 10 days in one school year.
Okay.
So once you hit that 10th day, um, they can't, they're not supposed to suspend you um, before having this meeting.
Okay.
Um, and the meeting is basically to determine if if disability, if your behavior is caused by a manifestation of disability. So
Okay.
so is your behavior caused because, let's say you're on the autism spectrum,
Hmm.
and you have sensory disabilities,
Hmm.
and people are talking very loudly all
Hmm.
around you, and at
Hmm.
one point you kind of just have a meltdown, if you will,
Hmm.
and like it- go like this and scream or something, and a teacher thinks that's inappropriate behavior, and they say okay, this student was screaming in the classroom, I want to suspend her for
Hmm.
1 day.
Hmm.
um i- if the person has already had 9 days of suspensions,
Hmm.
um then they can't do that without having the meeting. And the key thing, the word suspension is not suspension as we think of it all the time,
Okay.
um, because a de facto the suspension counts. Like you have, like I've had cases, especially in elementary school, where you have a student who is, I'll say, misbehaving,
Hmm.
um, or according to the teachers are misbehaving. A lot of times it has to do with the disability, but according to the teachers, they're misbehaving. So they'll call the parent and tell the parent to come to pick up the student.
Hmm.
Well, the parent came and picked up the student before the school day ends, sometimes even before the lunch. Um, so they just have it marked down as, hey, parent decided to pick up a student.
Hmm.
It's not a suspension. And so you have all those days where these parents sometimes is leaving work to pick up a child at the request
Of the
of the
school.
school, but it's
Hmm.
not documented in that manner. So it appears as if this student only has 2 days suspension, A- and and,
Mm.
and and it's really when you dig into it did you find out, wow, no, eh, this student has been de facto suspended um 12 days or even more
Wow.
when the parent, they're having the parent come up there, and the parent doesn't know that these count as suspensions,
It's a,
or
I like.
anything about the
Mm.
manifestation determination review. So is it
So in essence, what you're saying is these suspensions, the manifestation meeting is to locate the triggers because as we know, like you said, from a sensory standpoint, whatever standpoint is coming from, we want to identify the triggers
right?
so that that will not continue to happen.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And
Okay.
we want to identify the triggers, and if the trigger is related to the disability, then
Hmm.
we don't want to punish the child for something that the
That they
child,
can't
that
help.
that's no fault of the
That,
child,
that means.
and especially um, if there's some method that can work. It,
Hmm.
the IE team just didn't come up with it.
Okay.
So if it's an ineffective IEP, um, then th- you know that's one reason for a student to be termed for, for the meeting to determine that the student um, isn't at fault. And i- if it's determined that it's a manifestation of the disability,
Hmm.
um, then the student is not suspended. Usually, what happens, um, now they don't go without consequence.
That's
Um,
what I was going to ask.
they don't go without consequence. What happens is they um, basically the I team gets together and try to figure out where they dropped the ball.
Hmm.
What needs to be, what needs to be done to help this child. Um, and it also goes back to your earlier point as far as not just what needs to be done, sorry, certain what needs to be done to help the child, but i- if the IEP is helpful but not being implemented, that's
Hmm.
the other scenario in which the student might not get suspended. Um, they'll make sure to actually implement the IEP.
Now, I know this may be kind of a crazy question, Latifa. I know you're saying that the manifestation meeting is handled once it reaches 10 days within the school year. But if we're trying to identify what the triggers are, why would they wait until the 10th time? I mean, why isn't that something that is identified early on before it gets to the 10th time?
Right. And see, the 10-day thing comes from federal law.
Okay.
Um, so you can always do it before.
Okay.
Unfortunately, a lot of these schools don't. And not only do they not do it before the 10 days, the 10 days pass and they still don't do it because a lot of times the parents don't know about the MDR. So,
Mm,
so,
this is
so,
good
so, 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 so
information.
so they don't do it at all.
Okay. So this is great
So,
information. So parents, definitely take heed to this because, and I know we did have something one time where we discussed that your child's records follow them. They don't just drop off. They follow them. So these suspensions are things that's going to stay in your child's school record. So
right,
yeah, if anything happens, say they go to college, say they want to go to the military, these are things that help them. And I think we had the Freedom Act. We have an informational session on every fourth Thursday, and we talked about this about making sure that you stay on top of your child's school records because, like Latifa is saying, if you don't know that when they asked you to pick up your child, that is considered as a school suspension, then you don't know those days are adding up. You don't.
Right, right. Now, the one thing I will say is, um, those days, count count as a suspension when you're determining the MDR, the
Mhm.
manifestation determination review, but
Okay.
but in your record, it's not going to say a suspension. Um,
Mm.
so so it, it it can go both ways.
Okay.
You could, because you could see some parents say, well, I- uh, as long as a suspension is not in my student's file,
Mhm.
then it's not going to follow them. The problem is your student's not getting the help he or she needs.
Ultimately, that's the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, and they couldn't suspend for more, like we said, couldn't suspend for more than 10 days without this meeting, which means they can't expel the student. You can't expel a special ed student without having an MDR. Um, but there are a couple of exceptions that, like if the child is deemed to be a danger to the school,
Mhm.
or
Naturally.
then there are exceptions where you could keep the child out of the school.
Okay. What if now I know you mentioned consequences and you were saying that, that's where I guess a parent can call an IEP meeting or the school can so that you guys can revamp that IEP to factor in those triggers. Now, give us an example of what some of the consequences could be because when I think of consequences, I'm thinking of something like, of course, on the lines of suspension, but give us an example of what a consequence could be that would not prove to be detrimental to the student and their records.
Okay. Well, I think one type of consequence could be a student, like, let's say the student didn't have a BIP, a behavior intervention plan.
Hmm.
So that's one thing they do, is they create a behavior intervention plan for the student, and th- part of that plan may require the student to go to counseling with the guidance counselor, say 2 days, 2 times a week for 30 minutes. Um, so that could be, that's an example of a consequence. Um, a consequence doesn't necessarily have to be negative per
Okay.
se. Um, but a lot of students might feel, a lot of students don't like necessarily sitting down talking to a counselor anyway. So
Okay.
for them, that is a consequence.
Okay.
And especially if you do it during an extra time, like, eh, you can't do it during lunch. Obviously, a student has to eat lunch, but let's say there's homeroom, or
Hmm.
there's some other period
Like
the
gym, for
student might.
instance, they like
y-
gym or something like
y-
extra curriculum.
yeah, yeah. And I did intentionally try to stay away from gym or the arts,
Okay.
because those are required courses also.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but um, but definitely, if the person already has their gym credit, or their
Mhm.
arts credit, or their music credit, and they're taking another class, then yes, absolutely, sorry,
Okay.
absolutely, they would have to, um that would be a good opportunity. for for the teacher or for the specialist that have what we call pull out sessions, because
Mm-hmm.
there are some students that are pulled out of the classroom, and then there are other students that are they have push in sessions where where the specialist will go and help the student in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So it just
Yeah, so some
depends.
kids already look at that like in, and I will say like, some for some that don't know, like if they have in speech services or something to that
Right,
extent, they may be pulled out of the class. And like you say, in most cases, sometimes they're not. But some kids already feel a little iffy or have a little issue with that being pulled out and kind of being segregated from the rest of their class. So
right.
that can, like I've heard some parents say that's a trigger, because they feel, they don't want to be pulled out. And for as much as possible, the school tries their best, from what I know, the school tries their best to not pull them out away from their peers as much as possible. Because keep in mind, whereas some of us downplay the social aspect, that is so important. That is
It,
extremely important.
it is, and especially nowadays, um, where you have school bullying.
Yes.
Also, you don't want a lot of kids to don't want to seem different.
Yes.
Um, so that is something very important to factor in,
Hmm.
and it's something that the IEP team should take account of,
Yes.
and 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 that's one good reason why the parent is on the IEP team. Good, because if a parent knows this about their child,
Hmm.
then the parent, it's their, I'll say, responsibility, but
Hmm.
the parent should, speak up,
Hmm.
because a teacher may not be thinking about that, or every child is different.
Hmm.
Every child is different, so it might bother some children but not other children.
Yeah, and that's why the IEP is so important, because it's called the individual. So it's just because
Yeah,
Tommy doesn't have a problem with it doesn't mean Sherry will, so
right.
it's definitely an individual thing. And this IEP is customized for your special need individual.
Absolutely. Each
Hmm.
one, yeah, like you said, it's individualized. It
Hmm.
was made just for your child.
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah, there's no reason to um have this cookie cutter approach, if you will be, if you
Yes.
would. Um, eh, eh, I mean, you're required to have
Hmm.
it individualized according to your child's needs. So,
Okay. Now, Latifa, I know I met you in Maryland. Do you just practice in Maryland, or tell our listeners exactly where you practice?
okay, I practice in Maryland and in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm licensed to practice law both in Maryland and DC. And um, I also um, have done federal cases before federal administrative law judges.
Okay.
Um, so that's like the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the MSPB, the Merit Systems Protection Board. That's those have been employment cases,
Hmm.
and um, both of both of those cases, or both of those venues, um, deal with discrimination. The
Hmm.
MSPB doesn't only deal with discrimination, but EEOC, um, people think of discrimination when they think of the EEOC, and
Hmm.
and 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 that's a good thing. Um, but Yeah, that's a good thing. So um, it's just it's just one of those things where you have to figure out which venue is best
Hmm.
for your case. Um, a lot of times the MSPB is actually better than the EEOC because you can challenge determination on on broader grounds than the
Okay.
EEOC. EEOC, you could only challenge it for discriminatory reasons, or um, reasons having to do with um, d- having to do with the union.
Okay.
But MSPB is a lot broader. Um, if they if they wrongly fired you,
Hmm.
you can get recourse before the MSPB. But like so many of these agencies, there are there are a lot of rules. Some agencies, thanks to our current president, don't have the same requirements as other agencies, meaning like some agencies you have 10 business days to file a complaint versus others you get 30 calendar days.
Hmm. Hmm.
So so so
And I'm glad you mentioned that because I honestly thought you just dealt with the special education programs in school, but you go all the way up to the jobs too. Like, so you have no limits on what you do.
yeah, well, I would definitely say I have limits on what I do.
Okay, let me
But
clarify
no,
that
I
then.
get it. I get what you're saying.
Because you seem very knowledgeable from the school side all the way to the job. That's wow. So yeah, tell us your limitations too, because you sound
Right.
like
Well,
you do it
and
all.
that's basically it. Union and employment law, and then education law.
Okay.
So that's basically it. And I actually practiced labor and employment law before I practiced education law.
Okay.
So that's why I know about that. Um, it, but it just so happens that a lot of these things come together, even
Hmm.
when you're not thinking that they will. Um, sometimes they come together because you may be dealing with the student, but
Hmm.
all of a sudden the parent is having this issue.
Hmm.
Um, and usually the same attorney wouldn't handle that, and then normally I probably wouldn't either. Um, but there are cases where, especially nowadays, where people are losing their jobs left and right, um, because of the federal government and the current presidential administration. Um, they can easily overlap.
Yeah.
Like they've changed a lot of rules with the U.S. Department of Education, for example.
Yes.
So, but the, but the U.S. Department of Education is also an employer.
Hmm.
So you can have a parent who works there, but is also trying to get relief for their child through ed.
Hmm.
And it's not actually that out of the ordinary for someone to work there who has a child with a disability, because that's usually what the reason why they want to work there.
Yeah.
It becomes their mission, kind
Hmm.
of. um they say, okay, I want to work for the Department of Education because I've dealt with them all of these times,
Hmm.
um dealing with my child. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, tell us this, and I know we didn't go into it at the beginning because these are some of the questions I normally ask at the beginning. Tell us why you went into this field.
Okay, that's a good question. Um, First of all, I've always been interested in education issues.
Okay.
Um, my father is a retired um, teacher, coach, and administrator.
Okay.
So from DC public schools.
Okay.
Um, so I've always been interested in education and issues. And then um, I myself, I have ADHD,
Mm.
inattentive type. So
Mhm.
being neurodiverse, um, I have an inside perspective
Mhm.
on on these subjects. Um, you know, obviously they're all different. ADHD is different than autism. I mean, even ADHD inattentive type, which is the type I have, is different than hyperactive or combined type. But I was diagnosed as an adult.
Oh
So
wow.
I was diagnosed as an adult. So I didn't get the benefit of
Mm.
all of the services that I could have been provided with. And um, uh, that would have made a big difference, um, because now, even in the workplace, even if I choose to disclose or choose not to disclose, I should say,
Mhm.
um, um, I still have a general idea of what I need to succeed in the workplace.
Mhm.
Um, and that's something that I didn't have pre-diagnosis.
Mhm. Mhm. And it can work for you, and I think it can work against you. I mean, you are the poster girl for, you know, all that people probably did not think you could accomplish, even for, I'm sure, for yourself in some ways. I'm sure when you were younger, you may have sensed certain things, but sometimes as when we're younger and we're growing into who we are, sometimes we can't explain why I feel a little different. And I think we all could possibly say why we were should have been, because sometimes I say it for myself. I'm like, maybe this would, maybe I should have been diagnosed with this. But ultimately, it's a great thing with all that you accomplish. But some people do need those extra services. And when you can't get them, it prohibits them from being the best that they can be.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if I I just tell myself, if I could have just got some of these services in college, and I mean, I I did, and I did very well in college, but a, a lot of the stuff that was related to ADHD, I had no idea. So like the disorganization
Mm,
or time blindness, things of
mm,
those nature that makes it much more difficult to study, and it made law school much more difficult.
mhm.
And because I wasn't diagnosed till after law school, and they say a lot of people, actually a lot of women aren't diagnosed until their children are diagnosed, because
Wow.
women tend with ADHD, because women tend to have inattentive type, versus boys and men tend to have hyperactive type. So if someone is
Mm,
hyperactive and jumping all around, then then people pay them attention. But if a girl is just blindly staring out the window, um,
mm,
then the, the teachers don't necessarily notice, and that's when the child might get labeled as lazy or
Mhm.
doesn't pay attention or something like that, but they're not thinking it's any type of disability.
Wow. Well, I salute you because I mean, you endured, you conquered, you overcame, and look at where you are today. I mean, and I love the fact that that passion turned into you helping others. So,
Absolutely.
everything that was supposed to happen happened, but it didn't stop you. And I salute you and just commend you for, just constantly seeing your dream, come true. This is a dream for some people. Some people probably never believed that this is something they could ever accomplish. So for
Right.
me, I look at you and I would have never known. Not that we, again, that's why they have invisible disabilities because, you know, again, my daughter wears her disability, but there are a
Right.
lot of people that don't wear it or can't explain it, but they know something is there. So for me, again, these are my closing remarks. I just commend you, Latifa. I really appreciate you being on the show, and I would love for you to tell us how, for those that's listening, if they have an issue and they feel as though they need to acquire legal help, how should they reach out to you?
Okay, yes. Well, they could reach out to me by email. My first name, Latifa, Lateef is in Frank, A is in Apple, H is in Harry, underscore Williams at msn.com.
And I'm putting it in the chat, everybody, as at MS.
As msn.com. And then you can also reach me on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at Latifa, the number 4 DC.
Can you put it down there for me, Latifa, so that they can have that information? If you could put it down there in the comments section, that would be great.
Yes.
Yeah,
Let
this
me
has
see.
been great. I mean, your wealth of information, from it seemed like from A to Z. So it, like I say, it seems like you can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that. You saying that, especially because with the disability, it does cause me to sometimes stumble over my words. So
Hmm.
so that makes me nervous doing these type of podcasts. Um,
Okay.
but it's important to do it, and it's important for me to do it, uh, because people need to know I exist, not me, Latifa, but someone who has ADHD and has an invisible disability and can still do the job.
That's right. Well, you did a great job to me. I mean, you're very knowledgeable, you're very educated. So for me, you represent yourself well. You
I
do.
appreciate that. Well, thank you very much. And
Yes.
thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all. And I just wanted to close out by telling everybody, make sure you come to our walk on November the 8th. Is Advocate first walk. Here is one of the t-shirts that you will have. We have this one, we have a purple one, and all of this is for us to help parents. Like we would love to be able to support some of the parents that need the assistance of Latifa, like people like Latifa that can come and help you because some fights you can't fight alone. Some fights is not beneficial for you to fight alone. So for me, to have someone to come in there that can help you from the legal side, that would be great. We're doing our walk November the 8th. We have, as of yesterday, you can no longer register online. However, you can show up on November the 8th and you can register in person. We're having it at the Oxon Hill Tucker Road Center. We start Registration starts at 8 o'clock. The walk starts at 10 o'clock. So we're planning to have a fun-filled day. You'll meet the team, the advocacy team. we're just getting out there trying to get our first walk done, trying to, get started on a lot of our goals that we have set over the years. This is year 3. I think we're going into 4, and we are so excited about getting this done. So for those that have not registered, please come out and join us. You can register on site. For those that would like to donate to advocacy, you can always go onto the advocacy .org page, and there's a way for you to donate on there. Again, if you would like to join us, you can also reach out to me on the advocacy Instagram page, the Facebook page. You can always reach out, and also we have our emails on our website. So again, Latifa, I really appreciate you joining us. I'm sure this is not the last time you would hear from us, or we will hear from you, because we do have some parents that reach out to us and they need these services. So this is the reason why we have these podcasts, because again, most parents, when they're going through this process, they feel alone. And that's the worst place that you could be, is to think that you're alone or there's no one out there to assist you. There's always someone to help you. Always.
Absolutely.
Always.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because even if I can't help you, like we have networks of, say, Black attorneys,
I love it.
and just various other groups.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, um, Now there's actually a group. There are actually groups for attorneys with ADHD,
Wow.
because more attorneys, more and more attorneys now are, are being diagnosed with ADHD.
Okay. Okay. Well, again, you have Latifa's email address. She also put her information for her Instagram page. So if you need her, please reach out to her. If nothing else, she's a wealth of information. And like she said, she's resourceful. So we definitely, this is the whole purpose of having advocacy. We want to be a resource guide for our parents. And as you stated, not just for your special needs individuals, but even for our adult parents. We do have a lot of parents that have, special needs. So we want to make sure that we address the needs of everybody, and that no one feels alone or no one feels left out. So that's the
Right.
whole purpose of advocacy. And I just, again, Latif, I thank you for joining us. I thank all of my listeners for joining us. And this session will be on Spotify in a couple of days. So if you did not catch us on here, guess what? You can go on YouTube, and you can also go on Spotify, and you can listen to our sessions. So again, we appreciate everyone for joining us. Thanks again, Latifa. We wish you well. And again, if ever there's parents that need help, we will point them in your direction.
Well, I really appreciate it, and thank you for having me, Paula,
No
and
problem.
thank
No
you for having this
problem.
platform for parents.
Yes, I I went through. The reason why the platform is here is because I went through and I felt alone. So I never want any other parent to feel like that.
Right.
So again, everyone have a great weekend. For those again that are joining us, we look forward to seeing you at our first walk. Okay?
Okay.
Goodbye, everybody. See you next Thursday.
Goodbye. Thank you.